Greetings, folkaroos. It's Haley, and welcome back to my regularly scheduled recaps. I got back from my vacation, right? And it is past 4th of July, so now I'm back to my regularly scheduled chess meetups. And this is the out of town meetup, and oh boy, where there's some interesting games played, especially this first one. This so both of the meetups that I go to are scheduled to last 2 hours, and this one game, I played 5 games, but this one game lasted a full hour. This one game took up half the time. So let us dive right in. This was quite the game. So I walked in and everyone was playing game as usual. I arrived there a couple minutes late because it was like raining and there's lots of traffic and stuff. Uh, but I arrived there and this guy named Daniel asked me to play a game. And he told me it was his first time coming to the meet. So I didn't really know what that meant. I was kind of trying to figure out, like, is he a new player or has he just not played over the board before? But I found out as the game went on. So, of course, you know me. I start off with e4, then he goes e5, and I play my trusty Vienna. This kind of throws a lot of newer players off because after e4, e5, most people go knight f3. And he, excuse me, he already plays an extremely strange move. He plays b6. Um, which I have not seen before. This is not one of the standard responses to the Vienna because it doesn't, right? It doesn't develop a piece. It doesn't like contest the center or anything. It just kind of pushes a pawn. And sure, he's going to fianchetto here. And by the way, fianchetto means to put the bishop on this. So like picture this as like the corner of the board. Like this square right here, the second from the side and the second from the top. Putting the bishop there is called fianchettoing. So yeah, he can fianchetto the bishop here, but this pawn is going to be very well protected by d3, by like maybe queen f3 or bishop d3 in the future. There's just not really many ways that he can attack that pawn. So I go knight f3 instead of f4, which is the standard Vienna move because I'm attacking the pawn, but the computer did want me to go f4 because if black takes, I can play knight f3 and occupy the full center. And he can't really stop me from doing that. I decide to go knight f3, and he defends the pawn, which I like to see because he blocks in his bishop, and he moves a pawn without developing pieces. And for the life of me, I do not know why I did not play d4 in this position. Because after takes, I could take back with either one of these pieces, and it would be a good decision. But instead, I play bishop c4, which definitely is a okay move. I'm just activating on this diagonal. If he pins me, like if he plays bishop g4 in this position, right? I could have some bishop takes f7 ideas in the future after like d3. If he does nothing, then there could be like a bishop takes f7 idea. It doesn't work in this instance because here queen takes, right? But I could have some of those ideas in the future. But he instead moves another pawn and goes c6. And for some reason, this triggered my brain. Because I guess I must not have because in the Vienna, my knight normally isn't out on f3 this early. It's normally here, and I have my pawn here. So in my brain, I think the queen is the only thing guarding this pawn. And I was like, yeah, d4, if he takes, I can take, and he can't play knight c6. Like, I just kind of forgot that this knight even existed. B4, yeah. It's weird because after I came back from the vacation, I didn't really play chess too much on the vacation, and just with that week of not playing too much, I got really rusty. Like that just shows how fragile of a precipice I'm standing on with my chess skill. That a month or even a week of not really playing too much will cause me to decrease in skill level. Bishop b3. There was a very, very interesting sacrifice that I was kind of calculating here, which is knight takes b5. And I thought, like, here, he's just going to block, and I'm not doing too well, which is correct. But after c takes, I don't take the pawn with the bishop. The best move is something else, and this is the first audience moment of the video. What is the best move for white in this position? And the hint I'm going to give you is that how can you trap one of black's pieces using that bishop? And if you are able to figure it out, the answer is bishop d5. And this traps the rook because bishop b7 can't be played. You can't block with the knight because that would just be taken. So the best black can do is to play queen c7 and lose the knight or lose the rook, right? That's the best that black can do, just be down in exchange. But yeah, I play bishop b3, which is still good because I still want to keep my eye on this diagonal. A5, he's trying to play A4 and trap my bishop. This is pretty telegraphed, right? A4, B4. 92. I was like, I mean, he's pretty advanced on this side of the board, but I'm still happy in this position because he hasn't developed any of his pieces. And if we go into an endgame, all these pawns that he pushed up over here could turn out to become overextended and easier to pick off. And he plays h6. Like, this man is playing with no urgency right now. Like, he should honestly be focusing on either dealing with this pawn tension in the center or getting his pieces out. Like, I don't really know what this was like. Was he afraid of my bishop coming to g5? I mean, he could just play knight f6 here. He could move the queen. There's like so many things he could do if that happened. And my knight coming here, he could have just played like queen e7 or knight here, right? I mean, maybe he was afraid of this threatening on f7, but he could just play this. h6, d takes, and I was calculating here, here, and here, which just looked absolutely crushing because he can't defend this. So he didn't go down that line. Instead, he played bishop to g4, which I thought was a good move. Right? Knight g3, I clear the defense, right? Apparently, I should have played queen to d4 because after takes, g takes, I'm just targeting this pawn. And any move that black plays to develop, like knight e7, knight d7, bishop e7, hurts his position in some way or another because he might lose the pawn, and bishop f4 is coming, so it's just really good for me. I'm just going to be up 2 pawns. But takes, and this is not a good decision by him at all because now I have a checkmate threat brewing on f7, and he has to deal with that, and he deals with that in a very weird way. He plays f6. Like, you might be just like, at this point you might be like, Haley, you told me this game was really exciting. Where's the exciting part? It looks like you're just kind of trouncing an early intermediate player. This is probably the least exciting part of the game because yeah, f6 opens up h5, and he goes here and I take. Well, he could have. Apparently, my best move in this position was this, but just because of the opening of the d file and pinning this bishop or something. Like, I don't know, but I go for the more aggressive option, and I get the queen in, and I check. And here I throw in a bit of a funky little tactic. I play e7, and if he takes with either the bishop or the queen, I will take this knight because it is double attacked. And if he takes with the knight, I was going to take this and hit the rook because the queen no longer defends it. He takes with the queen and I take. And I'm just up 4 points of material and completely and utterly winning. d5, he's trying to strike back with what little he has. He still has no urgency about getting these pieces in the game. So I castle, and I'm going to put my rook on e1, maybe, or put my rook on d1, perhaps, and try to, like, get in. What I was looking at was developing my bishop, putting a rook here, and taking control over this square. That just looked absolutely crushing. That was my goal at this point. Takes and rook e1. Right, rook e1. But there is a slight problem with my position, and it's that the back rank is kind of weak, but I could just deal with that in like one move. That's not really an issue for me. Queen g7, he's trying to trade queens and trade the attacking forces, which I definitely could have done, and I'd still be completely winning because I'm up a piece, and like I said before, he's got overextended pawns and no development, but I choose to check and back up and try to keep the attack going because I still have a lot of momentum. Bishop d6, queen f7. Now I kind of change my mind. I go for this trade because I'm like, well, he can't defend this pawn at all. Just my pieces are so perfectly arranged that he can't defend the pawn. So I'm just going to take, I'm going to develop this, I'm going to double up on the file, and I'm just going to wreak havoc, right? Rook h7, and I play. I'm sorry I ruined the audience moment, but uh, I guess the audience moment can be I play knight f5, which tactically defends the bishop. Audience moment, how does this move defend the bishop? If he takes the rook, what move do I have? And if you're able to figure it out, the answer is if he takes the rook, this knight can then jump in, take the bishop, and win the rook in a fork. Right? So yeah, he was a bit stunned when I played this, honestly. I think he was like, oh crap, I'm in over my head right now. Like she's pretty good. Bishop e5, bishop c4. I just back up. He can't get any of my pieces. So this was kind of a funny moment for me because I was like, I kind of like dolled myself up yesterday. I was wearing like a dress and sunglasses. I had some cool earrings on and like sandals, and I had like a purse and stuff. So I kind of felt like Beth Harmon a little bit from the Queen's Gambit, just like the one girl coming in there and just absolutely destroying this one, like the guy who underestimated me. Like I kind of felt like that, but uh, you know that was probably not the best thought to have because when I hype myself up, I tend to make mistakes. And you will see that that definitely becomes a reality later in the game. Knight a6, and I wasn't too keen on the idea of taking this knight because this bishop I really liked. I liked how this bishop was like really powerful and it controlled a lot of squares. I didn't really want to get rid of it. So I took this pawn instead. I was like, okay, yeah, he's gonna go here, but then I'm gonna go rook g4 and threaten a trade of rooks like this, and it just looks completely and utterly dominant. But he goes rook d1, which looks like it threatens back rank, but there is bishop f1, right? There is bishop f1. f4, I free my back rank and attack the bishop. He checks, I go king f2, and it's really easy in this position as black to like try to hunt the king and get your pieces tied up. Like if you go here, I attack the knight and you like check me with the rook. It's really easy to get into a situation where both of your pieces are attacked somehow. So he has to be really careful that he doesn't leave his pieces stranded. Bishop c7, bishop e2. I just say, hey, what is your rook actually doing here? Like, it's not, you're trying to paralyze my bishop, but just get out of here. He goes knight e4, king e3, and he pulls up with the tactic to trade pieces, which is this. And if I take, then this. But I still went down this because after king f3, rook takes c2. Um, the idea is knight e3, attacking the rook. And you force the rook to get out, and then you can develop the bishop and bring this over here, and you're just still much better. But he goes rook e1, which I was like sitting there kind of scratching my head, like, why would he not take this? Like this is just really powerful pawn to take because if I ever move my bishop, you can take this, and this becomes weak. I just really wasn't sure why he didn't take the pawn, so I go rook g7, initiating a trade of rooks. Takes, rook f1, and I make a mistake. Like I said, it's not good to be hyping myself up as like the modern day Beth Harmon because he has a crazy move to semi-equalize in this position, which he finds. My best move, by the way, was king e2, just attacking the rook and forcing it to move. Right, but king g4, audience moment, find the tactical shot that kind of equalizes the game for black, and it has something to do with the rook's pin on this bishop. And if you're able to figure it out, this one's actually pretty difficult. It's bishop takes f4. And I have a choice of what I could do here. The best move, according to the computer, is knight e6. And after rook takes c1, takes and takes, you play b3. And you have your pawns on light squares. That is the key. You have your pawns on light squares against a dark squared bishop, and your king is very active and is going to bully these pawns, right? This is the right endgame to simplify into. But I played this. I took, and he took, and now his rook is going to be able to harass these pawns, and if he clears out all these pawns, this is going to become very scary for me. I didn't I honestly didn't see that other simplification, which I would have done if I saw it. But yeah, I still have to be very careful here. And I'm not careful. I play bishop takes h6, lose the pawn, and then play bishop e3. And folks, it's now like pretty much even because I blundered b3 check. And luckily, this doesn't just lead to a promotion because b takes c2 and the bishop protects the promotion square. But like, I'm in a difficult situation right now because now I have to constantly keep watch over this pawn, and his rook can just pick this off, and this will also become a problem. g4. Um, by the way, h4 is not good because you lose it by the rook. So g4, and then I can play h4 because the pawn blocks. Rook a1, h4. I'm just like, you know what? These are my only pawns that I can push. Let's go. c1 queen. He decides to promote now to get rid of my bishop, and now it is knight versus rook with equal pawns. h5. And he makes a very bad move in this position. His best move was to play this, giving me a check, forcing me to go up to g6. I was being a little finicky there. And then playing rook g1. Because if I start pushing, then he can take. And if I take, then he can go here, king g6. And then he can sacrifice the rook and then walk his king down and take this. And I'm going to have to sacrifice the knight to pick off these pawns, and it's going to be a draw. But he plays rook b1. He plays rook b1 because he thought that here, 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 and that he was going to get my pawn, and I would have to play king g6, and then he could sacrifice, right? But audience moment. What is my only good move in this position? And it uses a concept called interposition, which is when you put a piece in between an attacking piece and the piece that it is attacking. And if you're able to find it, the answer is knight h5, using this pawn as an anchor, and this pawn will just queen. And by the way, what happens if I go king g6 in this position is that he sacrifices, and then he pushes this and brings the king down, and it's basically even. But yeah, he sees knight there, and he allows me to queen because he thinks it's going to be difficult for me to stop. But I find an interesting queen maneuver here: queen to e8, check, and queen a3. And now his hands are kind of tied because he can't promote here. I'm attacking the rook, and I'm also going to take on f6 and have another pawn that could become a queen. So he checks, I go up, and then he starts pushing the other pawn. Knight f5. I bring the knight around to check the king, and the king is starting to actually run out of a lot of good squares. King c6, knight takes, and he starts pushing that pawn. I go king f7, clearing this, because he can't do this because then I take with check, and then I just go back. So king b5, and then I go here, threatening the triple fork on c3. So he checks, I go down, no more checks for him, so he goes king c6, attacks my knight. I go there, and I go, so I can't take with this because I lose my queen, and if I take with the queen, then I lose my knight. So queen a4 check gets out of the way, and then I take c3 and queen c2. And I'm just going to take this pawn, and he resigned. And I mean, I did win the game, but I think I learned to stop thinking of myself as Beth Harmon and just play my games. But yeah, we moved into another game, and this game, honestly, Unfortunately, was not as exciting as the last game. This game was, quicker, right? 29 moves long. But anyway, we'll still look at it, of course. So e4, yeah, I did turn the review on. So e4, c6, right? You know me, I'm gonna play the Caro-Kann. But even the Caro-Kann master herself has not yet faced the move that he played. So I have played about, I don't know, like a combined of like 7,000 chess games across all of my accounts. Thousands of those in the Caro-Kann. But there is one variation that he plays here that I have never faced in any of those like 7 to 8,000 games, and that is pawn to b3, which is known as the Oiva attack, named after the famous player Oiva. And obviously, the point is to fianchetto the bishop on this diagonal, right? And I was just kind of like shell shocked at this. I was like, "Is this a variation, or is he just like playing stuff?" I don't know. I'm just gonna do my normal d5. And after looking at this variation last night, I found out that the main line is e5. Then black plays c5 to prevent d4, c3 to enable d4, then knight c6, d4 takes, bishop f5, knight f3, e6. So it kind of looks like a standard advanced Caro-Kann, except that the c file is completely open, right? And this pawn has been pushed, right? It's very strange. I've never seen it, but he plays d3, which is not the main line. And I was toying around with the idea of and take, take here, because after knight f6, the natural move e5 loses to knight g4, and I calculated this, and I decided against that because I didn't like how he could play f3 and just restrict my knight, and my bishop cannot develop here or here, so it either has to go to d7, making my knight unable to go there, or it has to go in front of my pawn. I just didn't like how he could set up this wedge against my knight. Right, I made a decision based on that factor, and I played this myself because I'm like, yeah, I'm going to contest the diagonal, which I don't really get because, yeah, he's just going to go here, and I can't play here. Like, he's just going to go there. What I should have done was knight f6. But what I was nervous of was if he pushed, right, and I had to go, like, out here. I didn't like how my knight was isolated and how he could just push and attack my rook at any old time he pleases. But yeah. So d4. I decided to push, guarded by the queen, and block the diagonal. He goes 92, and I defend with e5, and I was liking my position at this point. I was disappointed with the way I handled the opening, but I was liking my position that I had thus far. c3, c5. I have a bind in the center of the board. His bishop sucks. So the point of his opening has been neutered. G3. This just, I mean, the man loves fianchettoing his bishops. Mr. Daniel here, he loves putting the bishops on these diagonals, but this is not really a sensible decision in my mind because that's your own pawn that you're looking at. I just don't get it. Knight c6 adds more protection on this. Bishop g2, and I go bishop g4. My idea with this was to provoke the move f3, go back, play bishop h6, and have the e3 square to myself, right? That was the goal with that. He castles, and I play bishop h6. The computer wanted me to just start launching an attack on that pawn structure, but I felt like that was a bit hasty at this point, especially considering my king was still in the center and my pieces were undeveloped. So I played bishop h6, and he just plays the very natural move f4, interposing, like I said before, against my threat. f6. I was toying with the idea of knight f6, but I did not like the fact that he could just do this. But I missed knight g4. I missed knight g4. Just I mean, that's the whole point of that thing that I did before. I missed it, right? So I played f6, and I'm just in a very bad position. If he plays like b4, like he goes b4 and I play b6, then take, and then I could take, and b5, knight a5. Yeah, and like my pieces just aren't doing anything. None of my pieces have a target, and my king is still in the middle, so this is just like very bad for me. But he doesn't do that. After f6, he plays knight d2, just going for like the more slow approach. Knight g to e7 takes. An audience moment here. Which is the better pawn to take with in this position? Which is the better pawn? And if you're able to figure it out, the answer is definitely this pawn. Because if you take with this pawn, you loosen the blockade on white's center, and you also weaken this. Like, this pawn is just going to be a sitting duck. Like queen c2, rook here, and then if you go here, the light squares weaken over here. But if you take with the c pawn, then there's no targets for white along the c file, and you keep this together as well as repelling both bishops still. So I figured this was a very basic decision on what pawn to take. He does get to go here, but that's not really scary to me. Uh, I was considering this, but I really didn't like the fact that he could come down to d6 and make me lose castling rights. So I play knight c8 to defend it, which is just a really ugly move. F takes, and he plays knight takes c5. And folks, audience moment. His intention here was after I took back the knight to play bishop takes d4, right? Audience moment. What is an intermezzo that I can play? Remember, intermezzo is in between move. What is an intermezzo that I can play to nullify his idea and win a piece? I'll give you a hint. Use this pawn to do something. And if you're able to figure it out, the answer is bishop to e3. Using that same idea that I created by provoking f3 in the opening, defending the pawn, and checking the king. So when the king moves, I just take the knight for free. And white's best move in this position is to do this. And I'm just comfortably up 1 point of material. But he doesn't do that. He instead goes bishop a3, which does like do that, but it's not really too scary for me. Knight g4. What I'm trying to set up here is control over the f2 square. Knight takes. Really, really unsure about that one. But I guess if I play knight to f2 in this position, takes, then knight f3, and like I'm still like this bishop is kind of weird, and he's gonna have the open f file to use with his bishop, and it's like he's fighting back, but he just goes here and just loses. Like I don't get it. I don't. Queen f3. He's trying to obviously go down here and checkmate me, but like I'm going to allow that. I am, after all, the real life Beth Harmon. Queen takes f6. He trades. He's kind of like, well, I have no real other option here. Trade, and h3. This says, well, I mean, yeah, I'm attacking your knight, right? So you got to move it, but I don't have to move it at all. I can take the rook, and if he takes here, then I can get the bishop out, and if he takes here, then I can go here. Which is exactly what happens. Which is exactly what happens. Rook e1 takes, just simplify, then I get the knight out. I didn't want to really go here because I didn't see what I could do from that square. The pawns just control me, so I go here. Bishop there, attacking my rook. He's like, maybe she won't see it. Rook f8. No, of course I'm going to see it. G4, rook c8, and that threatens to win a bishop. So he moves the king, and but I invade anyway. He goes down, and I go here, and he resigns because my goal here, what I was going to do next, was play g5 and just try to set up a mating net around this king, and it was not looking good. So he resigned. So yeah, that game was not as exciting, and it kind of reaffirmed my confidence in myself. And folks, we have the third episode of the saga of this guy. The remember the guy from last time I went to this meet where he tried and failed twice to play against the tall variation because he played f6 and just completely let the light squares get butchered. This is episode 3, but not this game, but the games after this game is episode 3 of me trying to teach him how to play against the tall variation. But in this game, right, deathly afraid of my Caro-Kann, he plays d4, which you can't play the Caro-Kann against. So I have to break out my d4 repertoire, which includes knight f6, but I remembered that he is a London player. He likes to play the London system, which is just a very annoying and super solid system. I think I've talked about it before, but yeah. Well, against the London, I like to just go d5 and then e6, bishop f5, and we just get to a very boring start. Like, this is a completely symmetrical game so far. Bishop d3 takes. I was like almost considering like bishop d6 takes just to continue the symmetry. But I play c5, like I talked about in like the last video, or the Haley chess journey video. It's good to get in this c5 counter thrust when your opponent plays d4, but not on move 1 here. And I was a little bit nervous that he might have this trick, but I just block with the queen, and I saw that, so I played c5. But he didn't do that. He played c3, knight c6. Like, look at how solid his position is. Like, what are my targets here? Like, I can go queen b6, but like he can play knight d2 and counterattack me and run a pawn back. But like, he just has no discernible weaknesses. Knight b to d2. He can't come out here, but he's just developing his knight, right? Like, he can't because of the fork, right? Queen b6, quote unquote. If you could see me right now, I'm doing the biggest air quotes. Threatens the b2 pawn, but I mean, it really doesn't, because here, and he's just gonna invade and win back some material. b3, so he gets afraid, right? I mean, standard human response. One thing this queen b6 move did do, however, was remove my ability to play bishop d6. So instead, I played the more passive bishop e7. He jumps in with the knight, and I play c takes, and knight to h5. And this is a very common idea against the London, because white's entire idea, right, is to reinforce the e5 square and then put a knight on that square to prevent black from ever playing e5. So black's goal, knowing that, is to play e5. So removing the defender, or a defender of that square, is a good option, right? So he goes bishop g3, and he's like, well, if she takes me, then I'm going to go here and open up my rook. But I accounted for that by the following variation. Knight takes g3, takes, knight e5, takes, and castles. Queenside. Castle queenside. So that this isn't really too influential. But by the way, I had an audience moment back here. Takes. What would happen if I castled in this position? Why did I have to take this knight first? And if you're able to figure it out, the answer is knight f7. And that's just a fork on the rooks. Right? You're just gonna lose. You're just gonna lose a rook, and then you're gonna lose the pawn, and it's really not looking good for you. So yeah, taking the knight is absolutely imperative if you're going to castle queenside. And I was still a little bit hesitant to do this because of just the fact that he can very quickly open up on my king. But I like the fact that I could go rook d7, rook c7, and king b8 and just completely cover my butt, right? Like that's what I was thinking about. Queen d4, he wants to trade and open up the c file, very human thought, but it's still fine to do this. It's still fine to do this. Right? Like you can just go king d7 and contest the c file. And white has absolutely nothing. Right? And I didn't necessarily see that, but I didn't want to trade queens, so I go bishop c5, which threatens that pawn behind the queen, so there's only one good move for white, being queen f4. This quote unquote attacks the pawn. Again, big air quotes, attacks the f7 pawn. But I go rook d7 anyway. This has two ideas. One, to just keep guard of the seventh rank, and the other to play rook c7 and just kind of get guard my king from being open on the c file. b4, and I go bishop e7. And like I said before, biggest air quotes imaginable, this pawn is unprotected. But audience moment, what absolutely knockout move does black have in this position? It's pretty simple. What knockout move does black have in this position to counter attack in a big way? If you're able to figure it out, the answer is rook to f8. And that's a problem, right? But apparently, queen takes f7 is a mistake because the king can just slide over. And you don't really have any, like if you take on g2, for instance, this pawn could fall, white could trade the queens. There's other things. So rook takes f7 is the best move, and then teaming up like that. He goes b4, bishop e7, and he sees that and goes knight b3. He's trying to like occupy some squares over here. h6. I want to move this rook and play f6. That's my goal, right? g4, f6. If he takes, I like the idea of taking with the bishop and threatening a fork and then playing rook to f8. But he goes knight d4. He goes knight d4, which just, I mean, looks at that basically. That's all that does. I play rook f8, and I'm going to take, and try to line up here. Queen e3, and for some reason I don't take the pawn. For some reason I don't take the pawn, and he castles. And now it's even again. It is even again, because if I take, then he's going to take on e5 and hit this. And if his knight gets to this square, it's like, honestly, that's a very annoying piece for black to deal with. So there's only one good move, which I found, rook f6. Defending the pawn, just holding everything together, and you're going to be fine. I did not, by the way, want to take this pawn at all, because he can play rook c1, and like he's got massive control over that. Like if I took, he takes with check, I can't slide over here. King d7. I did not like how much control he has next to my king. I really didn't like that. But apparently, like rook c1. Hold on. Well, something was. Yeah, 96 was the better move. Yeah, 96 was the better move. But rook f6, I'm defending the pawn, and he goes to rook c1 anyway. And bishop d6 just kicks the queen out. He goes queen h5. And in this position, something absolutely hilarious happened. I calculated the following line. I was like, I can go king b8, but he's going to check me. Blocks, and then he might be able to take my pawn. An audience moment. What move did I calculate in this position to win white's queen? And if you were able to figure it out, the answer is bishop h2. Here and here. And I just win. It's queen versus rook. Like, that's just completely winning. But for some reason, I thought it would be better if this knight wasn't here. So let's say he moved the knight back. Uh, right, let's say he moved the knight back, king b8, here, here. He can't even take this, right? And I'm just repelling him. So, like, moving the knight back was a better version. So I decided to get picky. I was like, I don't want the knight here, so I could have a better version of that. E5. See the problem with that? Audience moment. Find the mate in one. If you're able to figure it out, queen e8. Queen e8. And the king can't go anywhere. Like, this is something really funny that happens to chess players sometimes. Like, you calculate the most ridiculous variations, but then you just literally miss mate in one. Like, how does that even happen? Like, are our brains wired differently than normal people's? Like, I just don't understand. But anyway, we are to the meat and potatoes of my match against this guy, the Caro-Kann games. This is episode 3 of me teaching him the Caro-Kann. And e4 c6. I was shocked that he was willing to go into it. But I played e5. I expected him to play this and then struggle against the tall variation, but he played c5 because he is just very afraid about going against this. C5 is a different way to play. And the idea is you're forcing white to give up a center pawn, and you're just going to develop and win this. But right away, he plays an interesting sideline, which is queen to a5, attempting to win the pawn back by the queen. But c3 here and bishop e3 is a good refutation to that, which for some reason I forgot about because nobody at my rating plays this. um, but yeah, knight c6, and then the main line usually, like when I play this against people online, they usually play this knight f3 pin, and I pin them back. E6, bishop e3, defending my pawn, knight e7, queen a5, knight c3, something like that. They usually go something like that. But yeah, bishop d2 takes, and I play knight f3, and I liked my position here because I just have two developed pieces and a pawn in the center, and he's only got a queen out. He plays bishop f5 with the clear as day intention of doing this. And I don't know why I didn't do this. Just blocking the queen. I think it was probably because I didn't like this. But I had knight b5 in this position. And if a6 were to be played, then I could just take back, right? So I go c3. I'm just like, I'm going to push the pawn so that you can't take it anymore, right? This is just a pretty simple solution. And then my next move is going to be bishop to e3. He goes e6, I play bishop to e3, queen c7. He decides to retreat all the way back instead of like maybe going to a5, which I think was the right decision by him. Knight b to d2. I'm going to try to rotate the knights like this to have full control over that d4 square, which will prove very important later in the game. Knight c6, right? Knight b3. And in this position, he plays the fatal mistake of the game. After this move, his position was lost for the rest of the game. b6. Why is this move so bad, you may ask? Look at these light squares. Look at them. And you have removed a pawn guard from the knight. This is what we call Swiss cheese position in chess. The light squares are just absolutely wide open, and your bishop is on the other side of the board. So what is the best move to take advantage of that? I didn't play it on this move, but I played it on the next move. What is the best move for white to take advantage of the weakened light squares? And if you're able to figure it out, the answer is bishop to b5. Just exerting a pin on this, which is really powerful because the knight isn't guarded by a pawn. So if white is able to put enough attackers on that knight, they're just going to win it straight up. Knight b3 here, and I go knight to d4 because I'm looking for takes, and knight takes hitting the bishop, and if the bishop moves back, there's queen a4 ideas, right? There's queen a4 ideas. I calculated this, by the way. Like, I'm just calculating the most, like, long variations over the board, but I missed mate in one in the last game. I calculated the fact that I had knight c6, and if he moved here, then I would have bishop a6 here, right? and I have like some intentions like this, like knight b8 maybe, and it's just really bad for him. But he plays bishop g6, and like there's a common saying in chess, right? That grandmasters say all the time. It's not the first mistake that kills you, but it's the second mistake that often is the dagger. Because now bishop b5. And even if he defends by the rook, queen a4, or just simply taking because the queen is leading. If the rook was leading, maybe black could take back, but the queen is leading. You don't want to lose the queen for a knight. Bishop b5, he defends with the knight and he thinks he's still doing okay, but queen a4. And he can't add another defender. He can play this, but I'll just take. Like, I'll just here, here, boom. And it's just like he's just losing a piece. Bishop b5 here, and I take. He takes 94. Like, and then he thought for a long time in this position, and he played a6, takes, and lost the rook and resigned. It's not the first mistake that kills you, it's the second mistake that is often the dagger. The I was feeling like an absolute femme fatale, you know? Just like the beautiful slayer, you know, that kind of vibe. And that did not change really in this game. It was a bit more sloppy, but it didn't really change because guess what? We have our old friend, the tall variation. And he definitely has improved from the last time that we played this because if you recall, the last time he played f6 both games and just went on to lose very quickly. Even he lost a game with a 9 or 10 move checkmate or something like that. But yeah, h4, he goes h6, which is one of the main lines. I was very happy with him here. g4. And the main line often goes something like this. Bishop g6, h5, bishop e4, f3. The point of this, by the way, is to just provoke these pawns forward so that they become overextended for the endgame. Then here, pawn to e6, and then maybe something like queen to d6. Takes, takes. And white has some pawns, black can't castle, but black has more active pieces, and I think an easier position to play, in my opinion. Like, black has compensation. And also, there's the move h5, to which this is the main line, which is what I taught him last time. This h5 and queen. Like, it's normally a good idea to play bishop, and then like the main thing that I wanted to impress on him, right, is whenever I play bishop d3, you have to take. Because if you don't, I'm going to take you and then put my queen on the light squares. And I was kind of wondering if he had gotten that idea since the last time we played, because I played this, and he went here, and I just sat there. I was like, you are so close. All you had to do was this, this, and this, and you would be fine. You are literally one move away from figuring out how to play against your nemesis, the tall variation. But you played here. I took, and played queen d3. And now I'm just going to get quick development and pawn play over here. f4, right? So very astute viewers will remember that last time I played a position like this, right? I won his bishop with the tall variation, and then I launched these pawns forward. The astute viewer will remember that I got my king checkmated because it was really unsafe the whole game, and that I wasn't careful. So that was always in the back of my mind during this game. So I was really careful. But he plays bishop b4 check. And when I played c3 and he backed up to a5, he told me that he was like, I just had to do that to get more space. Like, that's what he said to me. I had to do that to get more space. I'm sorry, what? uh, huh? What do you mean get more space? Like, you help me improve my pawn structure, which further cramps down your position and limits your pawn play and breakthroughs. Like, this does literally the opposite of giving you more space. I really don't know what he meant. F5, I'm just crashing through, and he makes a very bad move in this position. Knight d7. Why is that a bad move? I played f5, he played here. Why is that a bad move? It's got something to do with this pawn. If you're able to figure it out, boom, boom. And do you remember the last games that I played against him? These light squares, Kazinga. And your king's just being ravaged. Your king's just being ravaged. And this was a very embarrassing moment right here. I mean, so backstory on this day, I had done a few hours of work, and then I had practiced chess for like a few hours. So I was pretty mentally tired, and that was before I even came here and played four more games, including that first one. So I was very mentally tired at this point. But I still don't know how I didn't see this. That's this. I don't know. I just don't know. Knight e2. I played knight e2 because my idea, I think, was to play here and back the queen up, and then maybe give a check and win the rook. I don't know why I didn't see I could win the rook on this move. He blunders it again. He literally hangs it again, but I go back. And I am starting to lose steam on the attack. c5, knight f4, knight f8. He is controlling this square. dc5, b6. Why is this a terrible move? He's obviously trying to free maybe his rook or get his bishop back. Or, yeah, bishop back. But why is b6 such a terrible move? And if you're able to figure it out, b4 simply traps the bishop because this pawn now cuts off the retreat square. The bishop that he moved over here to quote unquote gain more space is now trapped on the side of the board. How sad. Queen b5, attacking this pawn. If I play knight c3, I just lose the pawn, so I play a3. Rook c8, knight c3, attacking the queen before he can try to take and shred things open. Queen c4, rook f1, he takes. He's trying his best to open things up along this file because that's where he's trying to attack. And the quote-unquote femme fatale, Beth Harmon, I make a terrible move in this position. Knight g6. And I think it's pretty simple to understand why that's a bad move. Because after queen takes, what can he do? What did my queen leave undefended? And if you're able to figure it out, queen c3, like I mean, this is crazy. I'd picked the wrong time to do this over here. And now even if I play it's a check, so I can't play queen f7. And if I block here, I lose my rook. So I play king e2. And by the way, he cannot take my rook. He cannot take my rook because queen g7 and rook f8 is mate. Also, this just wins the queen. So he can't take my rook. He plays queen e5, bishop e3, knight f6. And both the times that I had missed this earlier don't count, apparently. Like, the second that the queen doesn't defend this pawn anymore, I'm like, ooh, I can take. He blundered his pawn. I'm so good. Ha ha ha. King d6 and queen f6. If I took with the rook here, I was nervous about this, but the problem with that is that I can take this and hit the queen, or I can play b takes c5, which leads to a mate in 11. Rook c5, bishop c5, king c5, queen a7, king b5, queen b7, king c5, queen b4, king c6, rook e6, king c7, queen c5, king d8, queen e7, king c8, rook c6, king b8, queen c7, king a8, rook a6. which of course I saw, but I just didn't want to do. So I played queen f6, queen h2, and I block. My king is completely safe. He goes here, and he says to me, I think we have to trade. But I say to him, oh no, we don't, and bust out an intermezzo. Audience moment. Instead of taking the queen, what is another check that I can play that is very bad for him? And if you're able to figure it out, the answer is pawn takes pawn. This sets up a tactic. Rook takes c5. He thought he was clever because I can't take the rook because the queen is pinning my bishop, but queen takes, king takes, and bishop takes rook. And I'm just up. I'm just completely up. Takes rook d1. Rook d1. This, by the way, it's mate in 3. But it's made in 3 in the most insane way possible. This is probably the hardest audience moment I've ever given, and the last one in this video. How can white threaten checkmate in this position? Just think about the positioning of the black king. How can white threaten checkmate in this position? And if you don't get this, I understand completely. And if you were somehow able to figure it out, the answer is the very subtle king d3. And like I said, positioning of the black king. Can't go anywhere. So this would be mate. I did not see that during the game. Instead, I played rook to d1, trying to give a check and win this along the diagonal. Rook g8 check here. He goes there. I defend my king from checks. He comes down, and I go here, which is unnecessary, but it's a forced simplification. I go g5, boom, boom, here, boom, boom. And I pick up the pawn, and like, even if this happened, he resigned a long time ago, but even if this happened, I know how to mate with king and rook. Which, by the way, would look something like this. King b5, and then I cut off the area here. King c3, boom, 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 boom. King c4, king b7, king here, boom. King c6, king a6, king, here, boom. Rook a5 check here, rook a1, and then forcing the king to go here, and then boom. It would have looked something like that. But folks, that is all I have for you today. Those are some crazy games, and I will see you in the next video.